National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
My name is John Paré. I'm the Executive Director for Advocacy and Policy. It's so nice to see everybody here this morning. Thank you for joining this seminar. Thank you, Valerie, for helping to get it together. We're just getting started with what's going to be just a phenomenal national convention. I'm sure you know that we have 7,251 people registered, and meetings have been going extremely well. And I'm very excited to be able to talk about advocacy and the various other panelists that you have coming up. All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit, we thought was sort of what I'll call the non-legal side of advocacy, more the interpersonal skills of things that you would do when you encounter a situation that might need some kind of general advocacy. This could be an educational, employment, website, just numerous things that we all encounter on a day-to-day basis in terms of needing anywhere from the small informal to more formal advocacy. I want to begin with a quote from Gary Wonder that appeared in the Braille Monitor, and it says that the way we deal with a company that is obstinate is different from the way that we deal with a company that is ignorant. One requires confrontation, and the other requires education. And I think that's a really good way to think about, and a theme will be in what you hear today when I'm going to speak for the next few minutes, has a lot to do with starting with assuming people are unaware of the problem that might be occurring, and to start with friendly education, and possibly, if that doesn't work, ramping up to what might be considered more confrontation. So maybe I'll start with a few stories and then give more some principles, but I think the stories might help a little bit. One would be this time I got a call a couple years ago from Sean Calloway, the president of the National Federation of the Blind of Washington, D.C., or District of Columbia. And there was a retail store in the district that was really pushing back on giving help to shoppers, blind shoppers, when they arrived, similar to what I would do when I go to my local grocery store. I might go in and go to the counter and say, I need some help finding some items. And in this case, the store was really pushing back on whether or not they might have somebody available to help this blind shopper. So the shopper really worked to resolve it individually, did a lot of good things, talking to people, escalating it to the manager. That really wasn't giving him satisfactory results. So then he did what a good thing is, he contacted some other blind people, contacted his affiliate president, Sean, and then the two of them went in and they did it. They went in really to shop. And they encountered the same thing. Sort of maybe it was 50-50. Half the time people had encountered a problem, half the time they didn't. So Sean called me and we discussed it, and we said, well, given the response you've been getting with individual shoppers and going in, let's just go in and talk to them about what their policy is, because we were getting conflicting information on just what that policy would be. So now we escalated a little bit, is what I'm wanting to illustrate, to a more formal meeting. So we had four of us, all of us dress up in our suits and go down to this local retail store. And I remember we walked in and said, we're here to talk about, getting help with shopping. And they saw four of us, they were very responsive. We'll get you a shopper right away. He said, we don't want to do any shopping right now. And they were like, what? He said, we just want to talk to you about your policy. We want to talk to the head of the store, and we want to understand, when people come in, what's your policy? And they seemed to be quite taken back with this request. And they scurried around. It's a very large retail store. And they scurried around, and eventually, maybe we had to wait maybe 15 or 20 minutes. They kept saying, is there something we can go help you find? And we said, no, we want to talk to you about your policy. So we finally did talk to the number 2 person and got the card and talked about it, and wasn't real good. So we got back and sent an email. And this is part of the things you want to do in terms of your escalation is start to try to get stuff in writing. So we sent a formal email. I think I sent it. I can't remember if it was me or Sean, but copied all the rest of them, the group, and described the situation. And they immediately, it was interesting, they did not respond from the store. They forwarded it to their corporate office, and someone from the corporate office contacted us, which resulted in a series of phone calls that occurred, and them really taking it very seriously and finally making some changes and putting things in writing and really helping to rectify the situation. So our escalation that I want to highlight was the more very informal, bringing other members in, escalating to your affiliate president, possibly the affiliate president escalating to the national office, consulting with other people, and so forth. We weren't sure what their reaction was going to be, so to kind of even, they didn't know this, but in order to be efficient, when we went in that time, not only did we go in to talk about the policy, but we surveyed the site for an upcoming protest. We thought, well, if they're not going to engage with us, which they did, but if they had not, then the next stage would help bring public pressure would be educational protest with picket signs and chanting and flyers and trying to get some press. So at the same time, we sort of had that in our back pocket. We never needed to use it, which is good because they did engage with us, but that is something to keep in mind. Another time would be something that I'm sure you all have encountered, we all do, what much too often is an inaccessible website. There's an article in the Braille Monitor by Carl Belanger. I want to quote the exact article. So the article is entitled Effective Reporting of Accessibility Issues to Developers. It's by Carl Belanger, and it's in the November 2018 Braille Monitor. November 2018 by Carl Belanger. He's one of the Access Technology staff here at the Jernigan Institute. And he has a really thorough email about what's the best way to escalate a problem to the company, to bring it to their attention, and to write an email that has sufficient detail to really help them fix the problem. I had a situation one time where I was at a conference and I met the president of a company that I was having problems with, and I got the president's card and kind of followed this, because a lot of this is you got to make sure you get into the company, into the sort of decision makers or developers. So when I explained this to the president of this small company said, send me an email and I'll try to escalate it. So it ended up finally leading to going back and forth via email. But it was interesting when I finally got so that I was on one time with several developers, on the speakerphone with the website pulled up on my computer with JAWS, and then walking them through what the problem was so that they could hear it. And I would be describing, I'm trying to select this, I'm trying to select this. And it was probably a lot of unlabeled buttons and just saying button, 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 which I'm sure you all have encountered, or just unlabeled graphics where it says graphic, graphic, graphic. Is there what JAWS is saying? And they quickly, it was interesting, now that I was talking to the real developers, they knew exactly what the problem was, and they actually also knew exactly how to fix it. And that really happened pretty quickly. So it wasn't malicious. It was that they were ignorant. They didn't realize the importance of labeling every single button. And once I was able to educate and illustrate that for them, it made quite the difference. And they did fix the problem. Problems did creep back up. Because their big thing is trying to really institute a culture of accessibility, which is something maybe we'll talk about later in the presentation today. All right, so I want to go through. So the escalation that I think you should consider would begin with what I would call informal education. So this is more when you're talking one-on-one to folks, whether it's in a transportation situation at an airport or a company or education, and having more conversational, informal to rectify the situation. Frequently, that works. As you get possibly pushback or things are moving slow, you should begin to formalize your advocacy and quickly put things into writing. It is very important in the later stages of advocacy, in case we say you get all the way to legal, that you have a good paper trail. So make sure as you start to create a paper trail, writing what was said, that you're maintaining a very professional, maybe less, very factual, not so emotional, but very factual correspondence back and forth. And that can be really helpful, I think, both at that stage, but also in the event that we get to other stages later on. Next would be to start to engage other blind people, your chapter president, your affiliate president. Affiliate president can reach out to the national president. So we start to figure out, let's get not just you, but let's start to get a whole team, the organized blind movement, trying to work on this particular issue. That can make a big difference. And then if we still having problems, then you have to think about what possible public relations effort, social media, op-eds, public shaming, what can we do to make them realize that what they're doing is not correct? Sometimes that will lead even to a protest. If that's an educational protest is needed, then that's certainly what we need to do. And then even past that, sometimes companies are so obstinate in situations that this can result in legal action, which the subsequent presenters are going to talk to you more about when we get all the way to legal action. But having followed through those steps helps improve the situation in the event we get to we need to go to the legal option. Another thing I would like to point out is our culture of what I will call the 4 Ps. One of the reasons our advocacy is so effective is because we constantly maintain the following 4 things. One is that we're polite. As you go through and work on this, please be sure to maintain a very polite please and thank you on when you're talking to people. You can be assertive but polite. That's not a problem. Be assertive. Make sure you communicate, but you can still do it in a way that's polite. Professional is my second P. Making sure that when you send these emails that there's a certain air of formality. I think being more formal is good, especially if we need to use them later on. But it can help you with the message we're trying to communicate, which really leads into number 3, which is to be persuasive. A lot of times, if you explain why we're having, that we can access what we need to do, if they would just correct the accessibility problem, say on a website, or if they would just give us the correct assistance, or if we had copies of Braille, we can effectively do the things if we're given the opportunity. And part of being persuasive is a lot of times is through this education and explaining why things are needed and why it's reasonable. So you do the polite, professional, persuasive, and the last I always like to say is persistent. I don't want anyone to think that because we're polite that we're not going to keep working at this till we are successful, because we are. And that's where the escalation comes in. We're going to keep working until we get the equal opportunity that we're looking for equal participation in an equally effective way. So keep the 4 Ps in mind: being polite, professional, persuasive, and then persistent. All right, I think that, Valerie, that maybe wraps up my initial part of the presentation.
Well, thank you, John. This is Scott LaBarre. I was supposed to be on at the beginning of this. I was trying. I could hear all of you, but you weren't hearing me, and I couldn't get my computer to do anything. So I'm sorry about that, but John has given you an excellent introduction to this topic. And I would agree with 3 of your 4 Ps, John. You know, as a lawyer, I don't know how I do on politeness sometimes. Anyway. But, you know, seriously, all of those elements are critically important in dealing with these situations. And I think there's another critically important point before I turn this over to Valerie to talk about a story of somebody advocating for themselves and achieving a result. You need to be as prepared as you possibly can. Now, I understand that what I'm going to talk about right now is the ideal situation. But as close as you can get to the ideal situation as possible will make your advocacy more effective. You need to be a well-prepared, trained blind person. What do I mean by that? If you want to prove ultimately to a court, if you have to, or if you have to prove to the public or prove to an entity that you are competent and you deserve whatever service you're trying to get, or education or job or whatever the issue might be, it's important that you have the skills, that you are able to do the job, that you are able to perform the task. And what do I mean by that? Well, we all need good blindness skills. And however you get them, you need to get them. Because if you show up to a job and you can't get around a place on your own, or if you go to a school and you're going to be dependent on that school for everything, it's going to make your case for self-advocacy harder. So I know we all have different circumstances and we have all kinds of different situations, but you need to try and get the best education and blindness skills as you can. Now, of course, we have an opinion in the Federation. The best skills are taught at our centers, the Louisiana Center for the Blind, Blind Incorporated, and the best center, the Colorado Center for the Blind. And the reason I say that, of course, is I'm here in Colorado. I'm speaking to you from Centennial, Colorado. But honestly, all 3 of our centers are amazing and wonderful. And that's where you can get great skills to prepare yourself. And of course, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but in any of these advocacy situations, it is critical that you keep great records. Always document what is going on. However that works for you, whether it's jotting something down in Braille, whether it's putting it on your computer in a Word document, whether it's taking a Victor Reader stream and making audio notes in files. Because with these matters, if they do follow the legal course, what happens is you realize that you wind up years later, and then you're trying to think, well, what exactly did John Paré say on that meeting? I don't remember. So anyway, it's critical to keep records. All right, Valerie, do you want to share a story about a federationist, blind person who was dealing with an issue and without engaging lawyers, without engaging the legal team, was able to solve it?
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, John. And yes, I'd love to share a favorite story of mine. This is in addition to the stories that John Paré shared earlier. So just a few years ago, a newly blind senior in New Jersey contacted NFB's legal program for assistance. She had been told by her township that she could not use paratransit services unless she travels with a sighted companion. That's right. A service that had been established specifically for individuals with disabilities refused to transport this person because of her blindness. This was crushing. The woman felt that she had suddenly become a prisoner within her own home and would be forced to rely on her sighted husband to take her everywhere. She now had no way of traveling independently to the grocery store, bank, or other essential community spaces. Well, we got her connected with the NFB of New Jersey leadership. Joe Ruffalo and Linda Melendez worked closely with this new member as she stood up to staunch discrimination. NFB pulled DOT regulatory language that prohibits such restrictions unless the rider engages in violent, seriously disruptive, or illegal conduct, or if they pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others. And we thought this would resolve the matter quickly. Unfortunately, Monroe Township dug in its heels and engaged attorneys to determine whether this woman indeed posed a direct threat entirely because of her blindness. It got really ugly, but in the end, after Disability Rights New Jersey also stepped into the argument, the township changed its position. Our member is now able to use her local paratransit service independently, and since that incident, she's spoken with 10 or 15 other individuals who are also being denied paratransit services because of their disability and connected them to Disability Rights New Jersey. This member turned into an advocate and educator overnight.
Well, thank you, Valerie, and that's a great story. And there are hundreds of similar stories within the Federation. And one way that we try to support you so that you can advocate for yourself is by creating resources that are largely contained on our website, the nfb.org website, and to talk about some of those resources, some of those toolkits that we have and that we are not thinking about, we're actually working on. We'll kick it back over to Valerie again.
Thanks again. So, John talked about the importance of progressive self-advocacy. And you might be thinking, sure, this sounds great in a perfect world, but when you're in the thick of things, a self-advocacy action plan may not be as clear. And no doubt, self-advocating can be emotionally draining. At times, you might question yourself or the situation. Well, the NFB is here to help. For years, we have been building a toolshed of self-advocacy resources to help empower our members. And as Scott mentioned, the very first place I'm going to direct you to is NFB's website. Under the Programs tab, you'll find links to NFB's legal webpage and advocacy webpage. Both pages contain a wealth of resources appropriately under the heading titled Resources. The federal resources we list here include links to the U.S. Departments of Justice, Education, and Transportation, among others, so that you can easily find not only the regulatory language that protects your rights as an individual with a disability, but also direct links to complaint forms for these departments, as well as question and answers regarding what happens after you file an administrative complaint, how the agency's investigation should occur, etc. You don't have to retain an attorney to file a discrimination complaint with a federal, state, or local agency. In fact, the complaint process is included as a protective measure, not a perfect measure, but one that's included for you. You have every right to file a discrimination complaint, especially if you think you have cause to do so. The NFB's legal webpage also includes, under local resources, links to your local protection and advocacy office, legal aid office, and other resources for connecting with a local attorney, should you want to consult with or retain one. NFB's advocacy webpage includes model legislation. Our self-advocacy work isn't always reactive. NFB members work hard to challenge low expectations and to improve the lives of blind people. Collectively, our members have pushed state legislative efforts for parental rights, accessible voting, and Braille literacy bills, among others. NFB's model legislation is really helpful for this work. And then, also available via NFB's website is our collection of self-advocacy toolkits. Right now, this includes NFB's self-advocacy in higher education and self-advocacy for high-stakes testing. Both walk through your legal protections, how to advocate, what to do when there's an impasse, and links to related complaints and settlement agreements. The NFB has also developed an accessible education online resource, which was designed to be a resource for institutes of higher education, but which I love to include among our self-advocacy tools, because you can go to your professor, DSS office, or dean and say, here's an online resource for you that shows you how to make my courses and college experience fully and equally accessible. And soon to come is NFB's Self-Advocacy in Employment Toolkit. Stay tuned. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention NFB's Center for Excellence in Non-Visual Accessibility, CENA, as another powerful resource. The NFB CENA webpage links to the Accessibility Switchboard, a hub of best practices for organizations and industries interested in being accessible. It's something you can point businesses or municipal or state offices to as a part of your advocacy. It includes information on how industries can ensure that their procurement and other processes are accessible. John and I share a favorite resource. Earlier, John mentioned Carl Belanger's November 2018 Braille Monitor article called Effectively Reporting Accessibility Issues to Developers. And as John mentioned, Carl recommends that you include in your communication with the company information such as the date on which you encountered the barriers, what internet browser and screen access software you were using at the time, and what functions specifically you cannot perform. Following Carl's guidance will help you and the developer get to the cause of the problem objectively. That is, if the company is willing to engage in dialogue with you. NFB's mentoring programs can also be excellent ways to build your self-advocacy skills. By connecting with NFB members with strong parenting skills or established careers, you can learn how they self-advocate in ways that they have addressed disparate and discriminatory experiences. So even after diving into all of the great material included on NFB's webpage or website, and I haven't mentioned it all, there's also a really fantastic press release page. After reviewing these resources, you may still have questions, and that's okay. We count among NFB's resources all of you, members, chapters, and affiliate leaders, NFB staff, and more. If you're unsure of something, want to bounce an idea around, or need some guidance, just ask. You can contact me at the national office. I'm happy to connect you with resources specific to your experience. I definitely encourage you to contact your chapter and affiliate leaders if you've been discriminated against and or want to proactively advocate for change. You never know until you ask who has shared your same experience and how they resolved it, or who has a contact who can help you advocate. So if you are discriminated against, know that you are not alone. The Federation is here for you and with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie, and you bring out a number of great points. And I do want to say that truly one of our greatest resources is Valerie herself. She is an amazing source of information and can direct people in so many directions and can give you the information that you need. And so we've been talking about how to best prepare yourself to be the best possible advocate, having the competence in whatever area it is, knowing the law, and under that we were talking about all of these resources that we have, and keeping records, making sure that you document everything is so critical. But what if that all doesn't work? What happens then? Well, then it is possible that the National Federation of the Blind might intervene on your behalf formally and in a legal proceeding. Now, let me first tell you that it is impossible for the National Federation of the Blind to take all of the cases that we would like to take. There are literally thousands upon thousands of incidents and situations where our members and those who are not our members face discrimination, and we would love to take that particular case, take that particular cause. But obviously, folks, we can't do it all because we have only so many resources. So how is it then we as a federation decide to take or not to take a case? Well, let me be honest with you about one thing. It matters to be a member of the National Federation of the Blind. If you're not a member, then it is fair to say, I think, that you may not be able to expect the same responsiveness to your legal matter. Why is that so? Well, as I say, we have finite resources, and we can only do so much. And there has to be some benefit of being a member of the National Federation of the Blind. So I think it is just simply the truth to say that we do give priority to our members. And that only makes sense, right? If somebody invests their time, their resources, and some of their life to the National Federation of the Blind, that should make a difference. Now, does that mean the Federation doesn't take cases where the individual or individuals involved aren't members? No, it doesn't mean that at all. but I just want to sort of give you that insider's tip, if you will. Priority must go to our members. Now, does that mean we take every single member's case that we could take? No, we don't. Why? It's the same issue. You know, the National Federation of the Blind has tens of thousands of members, and a good chunk of those members have faced discrimination at one point or the other. We can't take all those cases. So whether it's a member or whether it's not a member, how do we figure out whether we can take a case? Well, we have developed a whole range of legal priorities, because if we invest the dollars of the National Federation of the Blind, and literally we spend millions of dollars each year on our legal program. The amount varies for a number of reasons, but we allocate millions of dollars to this program. So it's an incredibly important program. And so we have to be as strategic as we possibly can in deciding what cases we take. So how do we decide that? Well, clearly the area of access technology is huge, right? We have all of this wonderful technology, JAWS for Windows and NVDA and on and on and on. But if you run into a website on the job that is not compatible with assistive technology, then you're shut out. You're shut out as firmly and exclusively as you possibly can be. So one of our critical areas is making sure that we have that technology is accessible to us. And under technology, there's so many areas, right? There's access to public services, you know, state websites. That's been critical during this coronavirus pandemic. There's access to educational resources, and there's access, of course, to employment resources. So many jobs now are dependent on information technology, and if we don't have access to it, well, that's a huge problem. So we try to prioritize these cases and think about what will make the biggest difference. What can we do not only for an individual member, but for blind people across this country? So that's how we try to choose cases. Here's another example that's come up recently, and that is a priority area of the Federation. It's voting. Voting is a fundamental right, and we should have the ability to exercise our vote independent and secretly, just like anybody else. And this has become a huge issue during this pandemic because states are talking about, and many are acting on, engaging some level of absentee or mail-in ballots. We have to make sure that's accessible to us as blind people. And you'll be hearing about some of those voting cases this week, both through President Riccobono's presidential report and through a panel that we're going to be having on Friday evening. So, you know, we make decisions on cases not just because somebody's a member or not just because the case is meritorious, but will it make a difference for more than just the individual that we are representing? Another priority area for us is family rights. What do I mean by that? You've all heard the stories, maybe some of you on this Zoom have experienced discrimination as a blind parent, where the state or a local agency has stepped in and said, we don't think a blind person can competently and properly care for a child. So we're going to step in and limit your rights as a parent. Or in cases, unfortunately, of divorce, where a court says, you know, we're going to give more rights to the sighted father than the blind mother just because he's sighted. We've dealt with all kinds of cases in this arena, and that's why we've proposed model legislation, parental rights bills. We've got adopted, I think, now in 14 states. But those rights, parental rights, are very important to the Federation. And so I can go on and on and on about the discrete areas, but what I'm trying to say is there is no exact or one singular formula that we follow in deciding to take a case or not take a case as a federation. But we try as best we can to create systemic change. And again, I urge all of you to become members of the Federation if you are not already, because you can help us. You can help us make a difference. All right, so the last thing I'm supposed to do before we kick it over to some questions and answers is talk about some of my favorite cases where we have stepped in as an NFB legal program. And I was going to talk about one case, but Valerie's story about paratransit and requiring a companion reminded me of another one. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. There was a case, this is, oh my gosh, over 15 years ago now, but there was a time when cruise lines were requiring that blind passengers bring along a companion on the cruise ship so that they would be safe, because the cruise lines were alleging that it's not safe for a blind person to be on a cruise ship alone. And Robert and Joyce Steigel had booked, and they're from California, they're members of the Federation, they had booked a trip on Norwegian Cruise Lines for their honeymoon, okay? Robert and Joy are both blind, and when they contacted Norwegian Cruise Lines and indicated that they were blind and that they use guide dogs, etc., Norwegian Cruise Lines said to them, oh, you must have a 24-hour companion with you at all times and in all places because you're blind, because the ship is unsafe for blind people. Now, folks, can you imagine this? You're supposed to have a companion with you, a sighted companion with you 24 hours a day, and this is their honeymoon cruise. That would be one kind of funky honeymoon, I'm telling you. So we got involved in this case, and in fact, we were able to convince the United States Department of Justice to litigate with us on this case, and we won that case hands down, got the policy changed so that blind people were not required to have adult companions with them, and the cruise line industry has not been the same since. We have not been running into this problem. That is really, truly one of my favorite cases, just because of sort of how ridiculous the facts are. Another favorite case of mine, that's an example of somebody who tried very hard to advocate for himself, but ultimately needed help, is a gentleman named Aaron Cannon, where he wanted to go to the Palmer College of Chiropractic, which is located in Iowa. And if you're familiar with blindness history, blind people have been chiropractors, well, literally for a century or more. Blind people are able to competently and safely perform the medical art of chiropractic. However, Palmer told our friend Aaron that he, at a certain point, would have to understand x-rays, and that because he couldn't look at them visually independently himself, he could not be a chiropractor. And he tried to say, well, I need to use a reader, and I just simply need a description of what the picture is saying, and I will ask questions about it. I will make the judgments, but that's all I need. They said, nope, you have to be able to look at it visually by yourself. And what they also said stunningly, even though Palmer had graduated several blind chiropractors in the past, they said they would advocate that the licenses of all these blind chiropractors should be taken away because it's unsafe. Well, what was really great about that case is one of our expert witnesses was Dr. Dwayne Hudspeth, a totally blind chiropractor who graduated from Palmer, and he had treated several thousands of patients in his career, done so safely, never been a complaint against him, et cetera, This is another case that we won. We took it all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court, which issued a landmark decision saying that Palmer needed to provide the accommodations that were requested. So there are hundreds of stories like this in the Federation, cases that we've taken on and that we've been successful and made a big difference. Now, we lose some too, quite frankly, because the courts and juries they don't understand disability like we do. They don't understand the innate capabilities and competence that blind people bring, that people with disabilities have. So it's a struggle sometimes. I can tell you about a lot of cases we've lost. But the fact is, we're not giving up, and we're not going to stop bringing cases and advocating in all these different forms until we have achieved a day where you and I, as blind people, truly have the same opportunity as anybody else. So I tried to do this quickly so we had a little bit more time for questions. We have about 9 minutes. And so, Valerie, how do we want to handle this? Do we have people raising their hands, or how's this going to work?
We do, and I think Beth Hurst, our host, will let us know.
Beth, tell us what we're going to do.
Good morning and afternoon to everyone. A hand is raised, and the individual's 4 digits of their telephone number, the last 4 digits of your telephone number are 3755. Your hand is raised.
So 37.
Hi.
There you are. Who's this and where are you from?
Hi, my name is Raquel, and I'm from California. And I mean, this is great that I'm learning I'm getting a lot out of this advocacy, because I know I want to do what it takes to be assertive and all that. And well, here's a little situation. Our paratransit in North County, they have what you call this 30-minute window, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 30-minute window and all that. And I had talked to dispatcher, and is it true that some paratransits can be ride shares? Could they be ride share?
Yes. The law doesn't specifically prescribe how the services are delivered, but the law does require that they are effective. So if it's not effective, then that is the leg under which you can challenge it. Quite frankly, I think in some situations, offering ride sharing through paratransit would be more efficient than just sending around vans or buses. So the key inquiry is not the exact modality. The key inquiry is effectiveness. So thank you for that, Raquel. Who do we have next, Beth?
Daniel Garcia.
Daniel Garcia, welcome. Daniel, are you there? Out there in the ether somewhere?
There you are.
There you are. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is Daniel Garcia, president of the Kansas City chapter, and I live in an apartment complex, and of course, in March they said, "Oh, we're going all paper. We're going all digital. I'm sorry, we're eliminating paper." And of course, my lease was coming up, and I had tried before to use a portal, a third-party portal that they use to sign my lease, and I couldn't do it. I said, "Okay, I'll try it again," and it didn't work. So I said, "Okay, as a temporary measure, I need you to put sticky notes on the 19 pages you want me to sign on my lease." And okay, they did that. But I said, so I quoted from Carl's article about how this third party can fix their websites. So because they require you to do a signature, some kind of signature, and of course I can't do that with JAWS or even with my iPhone. Now I haven't heard anything back. Should I ask the property manager to put me in contact with somebody in that company, or what exactly?
I think that would be a reasonable, or if not putting you in touch with somebody, asking them where they are on this and when they're going to get it done. Because let me say here that if you have additional problems, you should know that housing like this, it really isn't covered by the ADA, but it is covered by the Fair Housing Act. And if you continue to have problems, you have the right to file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Okay, so keep that in mind and keep documenting everything and keeping your records, everything in writing to the extent possible. But you should definitely insist on your right, because even under the Fair Housing Act, they have a duty to effectively communicate with you. Thank you, Daniel. All right, so who we got next, Beth?
Juan Ortiz.
Juan Ortiz.
Hello.
There you are, Juan.
Yes, my name is Juan Ortiz. I am a vocational counselor for the Bureau of the Blind in Chicago. And you mentioned the word escalating, but this is the way I've been able to deal with many employers, believe it or not. When sometimes I get one of my customers that get a job, almost 99% of the company, the reason they are so afraid to hire somebody blind is because they don't know anything about blindness. And my biggest approach that I use with them, I educate them. And also I tell my customer, I say, listen, you know how to use JAWS, you know how to use Sunta, you know how to use those equipment. So you're gonna teach them to alleviate the fear that they have about you going in there, and you show them how you can do your job. And many times, many of the employers, believe it or not, what they need is something simple, like they ask me, how am I going to help? And I don't know anything. So I said, don't worry about it. We have people that do assistive technology evaluation. We're going to do an assistive technology. We're going to give you the report, so you know exactly what you'll be able to get to this customer. And that way, believe it or not, always work all the time. And the customer teaching them about what they do. Also, in case that doesn't work at all, I was telling that every state have different organizations that help. Like in Chicago, we have Equip for Equality, Design for Change. The Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind has a beautiful program for legal advice and help the customer. But believe it or not, I think the lack of education from those employers and try to alleviate that fear and let them know what resources we have, and assistive technology evaluation have worked with me all this time. So just a little.
Well, thank you, Juan. And everything you say is true, that, education oftentimes can solve the problem. And obviously sometimes it doesn't. And that's when it's important that you are educated about your rights. And I would just point out quickly, and Juan was mentioning this, if you are a client of rehab, you should expect as part of your services that rehab will support you in getting a job, which means going in and educating employers rather. Maybe they have to educate reporters too, but educating employers about what can be done. Rehab can send in job coaches or other information technology people to assess situations. So don't forget about that tool. Thank you, Juan. Who do we have next, Beth?
Denise's iPad.
Denise's iPad. Welcome. Denise.
Good morning. I'm Denise Martinez from California. Just a quick question. How do I go about advocating for more training in the medical field?
More training. Okay. Do you mean educating like doctors' offices or healthcare providers? That's certainly something that I would bring to your affiliate and say, hey, listen, we need to do more of this. Let's set up some programs. Let's get information out to doctors' offices. And maybe you can prepare a brochure. Maybe you can prepare, a link of resources that they can go to. I think that is a critical area of need. We certainly do some of that now as a federation, but we can always do more. John or Valerie, do you have comments on this one?
I think you covered it.
All right. Valerie?
I agree with you.
All right, let's move on, Beth.
Thank you. I apologize in advance if I get this name incorrect, but it appears to be Vias Vasilaskis. And again, my apologies. Vihas, the floor is yours.
Welcome to the program.
Hi. Hi. Yeah, it's Vias, but
Vias,
so
welcome.
I just wanted to ask, it's a general website accessibility question, but So I use two primary platforms to access websites. I use my iPhone with Braille display, and I also have a PC running JAWS. So occasionally I'll run into a site problem, or I'll run into a website where it's accessible on one platform but not the other. And in that case, I'm wondering if it's even worth mentioning sometimes that it can't be accessed on the other platform. The only reason being that other people may only have one of those devices, so it still might be important to advocate for access for both devices.
I think it is, and certainly in the area of Braille displays. Why do I say that? Well, because we have a number of people who are deafblind and really can't use JAWS in the way that I do, for example. So I think it is critical to advocate for accessibility among the different platforms and different tools. So thank you for that. Let's take one more, Beth, and then we got to go to our break.
Terrific. The last four digits of the telephone number are 8074. 8074.
8074, are you out there?
Yes, I am. Hi, this is Masha from Massachusetts. And I was wondering, you were talking about getting help at shops. And I was wondering what our rights in that area exactly are. For instance, we have a little market here that is dedicated to getting food to lower income people. And the way they do it is, the way they keep the price down, part of it is by not hiring too many staff. And so when I've gone in there, sometimes they said, well, they could like help me grab a couple of things, but we really don't have the staff to help you shop.
Right. So let me answer that as best I can, because there really is no one answer. Under the law, specifically under Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, any public accommodation, as the law calls it, has the obligation to provide its services, its goods, opportunities in an equal manner. Now, one of the defenses to Title III, or really any other part of the ADA, is the legal defense known as undue hardship. And so it's always a question of fact whether or not a particular request for a modification or for some kind of service, auxiliary service, whether that is reasonable or not. And so I can't really answer the question specifically as to your entity, because there are a lot of factors that go into deciding. But as a general principle, you have the right to expect some kind of service, some kind of auxiliary aid, some kind of accommodation, if you will, from any of these entities, and nonprofits like that are considered public accommodations under the law. Now, they might have a legitimate defense to say, well, we don't have enough staff members to provide it, but that isn't 100% defense either. They've got to prove that they truly have an undue hardship. So I can't answer your situation specifically, but that is the general outline of the law. So I think, go ahead.
This is Dick Davis. Can I offer kind of a quick answer to that?
Well, we're out of time. So really, can you do it in 10 seconds?
Yeah, sure. One of the things you might want to do is call ahead and make an appointment, make sure they have people there.
See, that's concise, that's beautiful, and that's true. I mean, again, it goes back to, we have the obligation to do some problem solving ourselves, and so that is certainly a way that it can be done, having something set up in advance, because they would probably have a difficult time saying that they couldn't do that. All right, so let's go to our break.